I was reading about Mozart recently, about how most people think he was just born and started writing incredible music at 3 years old. But what I was reading was that in all his early works, it wasn't his handwriting, or at least it had a lot of the handwriting of somebody else on there. And a lot of people say now that it was actually his dad, who was a world-class composer himself, that was there correcting all of what he was doing. What it was also saying, which is really interesting, is that the music we listen to is the music that he wrote 10 years after composing every day, doing it all the time. And obviously the result is that people listen to that music 250 years later, and they do it every single day. Another story I thought was really interesting was that Einstein spent 10 years formulating his theory of general relativity. He actually got so frustrated that he gave up, and it was only after he gave up that he discovered it. And the result is it forever changed our understanding of the world. And I share this with you because both Mozart and Einstein and everybody else who's done something that's had a huge impact picked one thing and stuck with it long enough to become an insider. And most people do the opposite. Instead of getting better at one thing every day, they tackle a to-do list of whatever comes up. Instead of spending hours at a time on that one thing, they look for distractions. And really, it's not our fault. It's just the culture we're brought up in. But I think it's important to take note that you can reach more of that potential than you're reaching right now by having a definite purpose and then staying on the path long enough to see results. You know, Michelangelo, the most famous sculptor of all time, someone who people 500 years later travel across the world to see his work, said that if people knew how hard I worked to get my mastery, it wouldn't seem so wonderful at all. And no, you don't have to be a Michelangelo or a Mozart and Einstein. You don't even have to want that. But the bad news is that anything worth moving towards that makes an impact takes a lot of time and takes a lot of dedicated effort. And that's why we need to get on the path as soon as possible to discover what that thing is, because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes. And by the way, it doesn't mean you need to discover your purpose now, but you need to get on that path as soon as possible. It's, in my opinion, an illusion to keep thinking, okay, I'm going to start figuring out later and figuring it out later, because we think that once we figure it out, then we're all set. But in reality, once we figure it out, that's only the beginning. That's only Michelangelo discovering that he wants to be a sculptor and he can make an impact that way. That's only Einstein discovering that he wants to figure out how the natural forces of the universe work. That's only Mozart discovering his passion for music. So we need to get on the path as soon as possible. And the good news is that this is really the first time in history that we have the opportunity to explore and find what that thing is. In the past, everyone was born into a certain expectation of what they were going to do based on their status or class or their parents. And if what was chosen for them happened to be something they liked or could be good at, they became one of those people that had a huge impact that we look back on and admire today. This is really one of the first times where we can make that choice ourselves. So last thing here is that Ralph Waldo Emerson said that what we lack most in the modern world is a sense of a larger purpose. And clearly it's not because we don't have the opportunity to discover that purpose, but whatever the reason, I really want you to see that getting on this path and starting to explore and starting to move closer to finding it every single day is extremely important.